After nearly a decade of fans asking for it, Five Nights at Freddy's and Dead by Daylight finally had a collab. And what we got...
I'm so sorry. With fire, and you'll get burned. Great atmosphere. And the fun one is a Fazbear special.
was possibly the best and most accurate depiction of Springtrap we've ever had. And also, somehow there are massive lore confirmations hidden in the chapter as well. So Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. But before we get into any of it, I hear you. Can we actually use a collaborative chapter in Dead by Daylight for canon lore in Five Nights at Freddy's? Yes. So about Springtrap. Alright, but for more of an elaboration, obviously the chapter in Dead by Daylight is not within the continuity of Five Nights at Freddy's. Otherwise, Springtrap wouldn't be around at all in the games, as he gets taken by the entity right after he's formed in Follow Me. But Scott did work very closely with the team when they were creating this chapter, and everything was seemingly approved by Scott Cawthon himself. Not to mention, the map itself, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, is directly stated to be inspired by FNAF 1 and the movie iteration, which are also two different continuities of this story. So personally, I'm taking the Dead by Daylight chapter in the same way that I take the books and the movie. It's not directly canon, but these interpretations are approved by Scott and are relevant to the major story. So while minor details may be different, or entire plot lines like Springtrap being stuck in the fog, characterization and general tidbits are likely still the same and carry over, especially since we get little to no characterization of William Afton or Springtrap in the games themselves. He's usually just an enemy, and we get some voice lines of him. Whereas in the movie and in the Silver Eyes, and now in this Dead by Daylight chapter, we get good on-screen characterization of these characters, so we can better understand their mentality and their motivations. So all this to say, who really is William Afton? Well, he's a cringy, theater kid-ass, pathetic old man. And it's also probably the best characterization of Springtrap we've been given so far. Leaving that so far in there because we still haven't seen Matthew Lillard's Springtrap, and I am hopeful. For the most part, the online reception of the chapter has been positive, but as always with Five Nights at Freddy's, there's a very vocal, angry minority of fans who hate this chapter for various reasons. But one of the most hotly debated topics is the characterization of William Afton himself, of which there's really two camps. Some people, like myself, love the characterization we're seeing here of Springtrap as this over-the-top, theatrical killer, and other people are wrong. But to be real, a lot of people looked to FNAF 3 as the inspiration for Springtrap and wanted him to act like he does in that game. A silent, stalking killer that occasionally screams at you when he catches you. Some cold, calculating, manipulative, terrible person who is so focused on his goal he's not going to throw out quips. But to be honest, and look, you're allowed to prefer whatever version of Springtrap you want, that is the only time in the entire series that he acts like it. And he probably only acts that way in FNAF 3 because of how little time we get one-on-one with Springtrap himself. Every single other iteration of Springtrap we've ever gotten is much more close to the thing we got in Dead by Daylight. In the Silver Eyes series, William is gleefully evil, and he's so connected to Spring Bonnie that in the first novel, he at one point refuses to talk without wearing the Spring Bonnie head. In the second novel, when it's revealed he's behind the whole thing, he literally says, "I am Springtrap." This motherfucker is corny. And don't get me started on the third book, when he's posing like this in dramatic monologues and has a fake version of Springtrap singing a song about how he's besting the person he's about to accost. William Afton is obsessed with being perceived as a grand evil. It's one of the most interesting parts about his character. Not only is he a horrible person, but he loves it. And he loves the attention and fear that he gets from it. He's obsessed with being perceived as evil, more than he is at being evil, frankly. And this isn't just in the books. I mean, look at how he acts in the movie. Once it's revealed that he is Spring Bonnie, he's rhyming and making songs, stabbing his daughter, and then yelling at people. Like, he is being over the top and showy. But I hear you. In the games, he's this silent killer, right? In FNAF 3, when he's really only there in the background until he kills you, the very next game he's in, FNAF 6, Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, he now has voice lines, and he sounds just as cocky and full of himself as he does in every other iteration.
Bittersweet, but fitting. How can I resist a promise such as this?
When you go through the FNAF media we actually have on this guy, it's very clear that he is a miserable, pathetic old man. And he's not only obsessed with immortality, but he is obsessed with being feared. And listening to the voice lines we got in this Dead by Daylight chapter, we hear not only this showman aspect to him, not only this jovial, gleeful evilness that he has, but that same miserable, pathetic desire to be feared.
I smell fear. The darkest pit of hell is open for business. I can taste your fear. Scream louder, please.
William Afton, and by extension Springtrap, has always been driven primarily by ego. And it's an ego that's very fragile. It's one of his biggest weaknesses. It's one of the reasons why he falls for the pizzeria simulator in the first place. Granted, he could be lying, but he even states that he knew that the pizzeria simulator was a trap, but he was curious and he was sure that he could get out. And the interpretation we get in Dead by Daylight perfectly encapsulates it. Agony Addict on Twitter said it best. Quote, I love how Afton is constantly desperate to see the survivors fear him in these. Even now, he's literally begging for people to fear him. Even now that he's in control, he's still so pathetic. It's perfect. This is quite frankly the best Springtrap has ever been. Visually, fear factor, and writing, and acting. I can't wait to hear Matthew Lillard's take as well when we get the full release, but for now, PJ Haywood killed it with the voice lines we do have. But as much as I'm obsessed about how good this characterization is, I mentioned there's meaningful lore drops in this chapter, and I wasn't kidding. Look at this plushie. You want this plushie. And this one too. They're cool as hell, aren't they? We only got a couple more days to get them, so I'd get them now, so they can become real. As of release of this video, there are about 7 days left to get these plushies, and if they are fully funded, they will be made real and they will be shipped out. Obviously, if not, then you'll be refunded. But I want these plushies, and I can't get them unless they're funded. So y'all better get them while the getting's good. I'm watching you. Link in the description and in the card. Hex.store. Pop goes and candy. And that's mainly in 2 places that aren't the map. Look, as cool as the map is, and I love playing on it, because it's a blend of the movie and FNAF 1, not a lot of it is meaningful for the lore because it's kind of a mix of everything. However, there are 2 spots where we get insane lore drops. The first one, a bit more minor, is the blurb introducing the character to the game. For those of you who don't know, all the killers and survivors in Dead by Daylight are captured things that were once in the real world or some other world that the entity, this otherworldly being, absorbs into its fog. And it basically, harvests their emotions and pain, and it's a whole thing that I'm not an expert on. But essentially, pretty much all these characters once existed outside the fog. So they all have these little text blurbs to say what they were up to before they were absorbed. And this is the beginning of the one we get for Springtrap, the animatronic. Deep within the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, William Afton ran from the ghosts of his victims. He frantically put on his beloved Spring Bonnie costume, the disguise he wore while committing his heinous crimes, to hide from the pursuing spirits. But fate had different plans for Afton. Something activated the spring locks within the Spring Bonnie costume. Metal clamped against metal, piercing the murderer and trapping him in his costume. As he screamed, the checkerboard floor rose up to meet him, and everything went black. Thus was Springtrap born, from the death of a murderer. After this, his blurb goes on to explain how he woke up in the fog and what he did once he was there. But this description is the first time the creation of Springtrap was directly described in any game media at all. Very clearly, this is describing the end of Follow Me, where the ghosts chase William Afton, he puts on the suit, it spring locks, he dies. But this is the first time we are seeing it wordfully described. And while that's really cool in its own right, am I right? Dude, so much fur is on me now. And while that's really cool in its own right, there is one piece of supporting evidence for the timeline placement of Follow Me hidden in this paragraph. One of the major questions surrounding Follow Me is when it takes place. It pretty clearly takes place at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but all we know is it's actively closed when it happens. So is this after hours and the door is boarded up because it's broken? Is this between FNAF 2 and FNAF 1? Or is this after the FNAF 1 location closes down? Is it before the FNAF 2 location opens up, and that's why the animatronics look like this? There's a lot of questions going into when Follow Me takes place. And I think the wording here implies and somewhat supports the idea that Follow Me takes place after FNAF 1, because it uses the phrase abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. As far as we know, up until FNAF 1, anytime a Freddy's location closed, they were actively trying to reopen it and actively seeking new investors to continue the business. The MCI papers mention that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza looked for an investor for years until finally giving up the search after the MCI and closing its doors. But that must have been very soon before the opening of FNAF 2. After all, if the MCI happened in 1985 and they were looking for at least a year, that brings us to 1986. That's only a year in between. I would call a restaurant in that timeline closed, not necessarily abandoned. And then as far as after FNAF 2, the newspaper directly states that they hope to reopen Freddy's sometime in the future when they can secure funding, meaning that at this point, the Freddy's brand isn't abandoned, it's just bankrupt and looking for a new investor. Whereas, after FNAF 1, there's really no news on Freddy's at all until a horror attraction opens up talking about everything that happened at this location. So the only time I think Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would be truly abandoned is after FNAF 1. Now granted, that's very semantic and it's not solid main evidence, but I think this is decent supporting evidence for the idea that Follow Me takes place after FNAF 1. But again, that's relatively small compared to the other place we find lore, and that is in the add-ons. For anyone who doesn't know, when you play a killer in Dead by Daylight, you get to pick 2 add-ons per match that modify the killer and their abilities. Now, all of Springtrap's add-ons are great references, even referencing FNAF World with the purple guy drawing. But when thinking about lore-relevant references, 2 of these add-ons stick out to me as particularly important. The first one is Freddy's hat, which reads, "Gabriel trusted the wrong grown-up. Now he's the star of the show. Increases the axe's weight while throwing by 100%. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. We were 99% sure that Gabriel was the name of the child who goes on to possess Freddy Fazbear, but as far as I'm aware, never in the history of the franchise was that ever directly stated. We just knew about the tombstones from FNAF 6, which lined up pretty well from the animatronic heads from FNAF 3, so many people already made the connection that Susie was Chica, Jeremy was Bonnie, Fritz was Foxy, and Gabriel was Freddy. Then in the week before, we got confirmations that Susie is Chica and Jeremy is Bonnie. So those 2 were directly confirmed in the week before. And now, in this Dead by Daylight chapter, Gabriel is directly confirmed to be the spirit inside Freddy Fazbear. The only animatronic from the first 4, as far as I'm aware, that we don't have a direct confirmation for now is Fritz. And frankly, because we have 3, I'm willing to say that is a confirmation of the 4th. Right, like if Susie is confirmed to be Chica, Jeremy is confirmed to be Bonnie, and Gabriel's confirmed to be Freddy, Fritz kinda has to be Foxy, right? So in a way, this Dead by Daylight chapter was the final piece of evidence to fully confirm the identities of the missing child incident victims and who they possessed. Which is crazy that that was inside of a Dead by Daylight collaboration chapter. And speaking of an insane lore drop in a collaboration chapter in Dead by Daylight, we have this add-on. Iridescent Remnant. Molten metal in the right hands, it's the key to immortality. It's like an alright add-on. But Remnant. It's literally on-screen Remnant with a silhouette visual with it. Keep in mind, like, this is the 3rd time ever in the franchise of games that Remnant is directly mentioned. And the first time was a footnote in Blueprints. And the second time was FNAF AR, where it was weird floating orbs that didn't line up with any other iteration of Remnant. This is, and I'm not exaggerating, the first meaningful description of Remnant in any game ever officially connected to FNAF. Ever. Like, the books go a lot more into Remnant and how it works. The games never did until this moment. This is the first time that it is directly and correctly described as possessed metal. Now, they don't say possessed, they say molten metal and the key to immortality. And that is true. It's molten to be maneuvered, and it is the key to immortality. And this is the first time any video game officially connected to FNAF has ever mentioned that. Up until this exact moment, we kind of just assumed that Remnant worked the same way that it does in the books, because we had no game evidence to say otherwise. So it was like, yeah, okay, the games don't say much about Remnant, so we can assume the books are true about this. And hey, we don't have to assume anything anymore. Dead by Daylight, of all places, confirmed that Remnant does work pretty much how we see it work in the books in the games, which is, again, frankly, insane. Not to mention, this is just a really fun chapter. I actually tonight will be playing more of this FNAF Dead by Daylight chapter on stream on this channel and on Twitch at twitch.tv/RightToastYT while we talk about Secret of the Mimic theories. Because as excited as I am for that game, next week is all Mario Kart for the Switch 2 release. So this week is going to be a bit of FNAF, next week a bit of Mario Kart, and the week after, some more FNAF. But in the meantime, if you want something that isn't FNAF, last week I covered The Dead Seat, an indie horror game that I think is possibly my favorite so far this year, and it's a video I'm really proud of that isn't FNAF, so I get it, but it's got a FNAF gameplay style, so go check out the video, I promise you it's good. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share the hashtag ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.